A 3-day peace conference between the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya concluded last week in Kampala, Uganda. Prior to the start of the talks, the United Nations Interim Security Force for Abyei, UNISFA, released a statement in which it stated, "The Joint Traditional Leaders Peace Conference, bringing together 30 leaders from the Misseriya and Ngok Dinka communities in Abyei, has officially opened in Uganda." Delivering the keynote address, the Special Envoy of Secretary-General for the Horn of Africa, Hanna Serwaa Tetteh, called on the wisdom of Misseriya and Ngok Dinka leaders to find a solution towards peaceful coexistence within Abyei. While decrying the increase in insecurity and loss of lives on both sides in Abyei, Ms. Tetteh said that efforts over the 2 days of the conference are key to working with governments towards finding a lasting solution to peaceful coexistence. Join us as we discuss this and more only on Beyond the Headlines. Our guest on the program is Mr. Edmund Yokani, the Executive Director of SEPO. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Our guest on the program is Mr. Edmund Yokani, the Executive Director of SEPO. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm honored to be always with you on your platform, and also thanks to your audience, wherever they are as they're listening to us.
Yes. The peace talks that were slated to take place last week in Uganda have now concluded between the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya. What is your update on the talk since you followed it closely?
Actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to appreciate the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya as the two communities of Abyei for adapting at least a peaceful solution for mitigating their differences or for resolving their differences, because dialogue is the only option that we like to promote always whenever two communities are disputing or having a dispute among themselves. So let's say congratulations that at least they have opted to take the pathway of peaceful settlement of their differences. The meeting concluded, of course, in a manner that all of them reach an agreement that peace is the best way forward, or peace is a pathway they're looking for. So somehow they have reached a point of saying enough to violence. They need to resolve their disputes in a non-violent way and through having a continuous dialogue among themselves, or what you call peace dialogues among themselves. And also they have reached a point of saying time has come for them to really peacefully coexist without embracing a violence among themselves. So I think I'm impressed. I'd like to say congratulations to UNISFA for driving that process, and also congratulations to the Misseriya and the Ngok communities for reaching that particular deal, which actually UN described it as a breakthrough deal. But of course, as we're going to discuss further, I feel the content of the agreement is below my expectations, specifically in terms of language. The language is not so strong enough, because I hope that this process could have been a proper track 2 process. And specifically sending someone like Hanna Tetteh, who sits as a UN Secretary-General representative, to AU, who is one of our revitalized peace agreement mediators. I know her very well, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Ghana. She's strong in mediation. I expect to have a strong document with concrete track 2 approach. But anyway, peace is better than anything. So I congratulate UNISFA and Dinka Ngok and Abyei and Misseriya for this deal that they have reached in Kampala. And thanks also goes to the leadership of Uganda for availing a space for at least dialogue have to happen between the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya through the facilitation of UNISFA.
Will the outcomes of the peace talks be respected and honored by leaders in the government, both in Juba and Khartoum?
This is the challenge. This is the immediate challenge. And also, if you see the content of the agreement, there's no proper mechanism where the communities, if I can describe them as Ngok Dinka and Misseriya, can hold the leadership in Juba and Khartoum accountable to their wishes, or to respect or to honor their wishes that they have reached in Kampala. The chances is very limited for that. Some elements in Juba and Khartoum may respect this agreement. And specifically as prior, the rollout of the peace talks or the rollout of the peace conference in Kampala on the 17th, there was strong messages coming from some Sudanese leaders, especially from Western Kordofan state. There's a proposal from some of the military leaders of Sudan that the Abyei Joint Oversight Committee administration to transfer out of Abyei should be taken to Western Kordofan town. And that's really a violation of the CPA protocol, Special Chapter 4, and also at the same time, it is redesigning the approach for handling the status of Abyei. So such elements who are in Western Kordofan may not respect this agreement. But also, Misseriya are used to this type of several agreements with the Ngok Dinka, and they respect none. And if I count on my research, this is almost the 5th or the 7th agreement that they have reached between the Misseriya and the Ngok Dinka, and the rest, maybe 3 or 4 were not honored by the Misseriya. Always they're violated by the Misseriya. They're the first party to violate it. And specifically this one where the content is not so strong, it's really the chances that some Misseriyas who may not be directly involved in the negotiation or in the conference may undermine this is very high. And also in Juba, you have had Juba before prior the rollout of these peace talks in Kampala, the Council of Ministers, and specifically this is confirmed by the official spokesperson of the government, Honorable Michael McQuay, that they're going to deploy forces of South Sudan People Defense Force to protect civilians in Abyei. But I saw today our chief of staff, our CDF of the army, have disputed, said they have not received any order to deploy South Sudan military to Abyei. So the chances that some elements in Juba and Khartoum may not honor this particular agreement is very high. And specifically, since the interest of Juba and Khartoum in viewing Abyei is different from the way how the Misseriya and the Dinka Ngok look at peace and stability in Abyei. For Juba and Khartoum, peace and stability in Abyei is described by the control of the oil fields or the interest really on the oil, while for the Dinka Ngok and the Misseriya, the peace and stability in Abyei is really they living free from violence, and they want to make sure that at least between them as two communities, there's no occurrence of violence. And from the Misseriya is that once that deny the migration rights, the only way is they have to come forceful. And there are chances that Misseriya, since they are at a pressing point in accessing grazing lands in Abyei, they may be the first party actor to violate this agreement, and they may be aided by elements in Khartoum that may not respect this agreement, and likely that also may generate people who are not fan of Misseriya having access to Abyei from South Sudan or from Juba perspective, will also aid the Dinka Ngok to face the Misseriya is very high. So I believe without a follow-up meeting that can be organized by UNISFA, and actually based on a question, I would recommend that there's a need for UNISFA, and specifically Hanna Tetteh as a UN special representative to AU to call for an urgent meeting of Juba and Khartoum to really discuss the outcome of the Kampala or Uganda outcome of the peace talks between the Dinka Ngok and the Misseriya is necessary. If they don't call Juba and Kampala to express their opinion on this latest peace accord between the Misseriya and the Dinka Ngok, the chances of the leadership in Juba and Kampala and Khartoum undermining this latest agreement between the Misseriya and the Dinka Ngok is very high.
You stated just a moment ago that you expected such a strong language to come out of the written document that came out of the peace talks between the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya. Now, what difference will the peace talks that just concluded make, given solutions for previous dialogues? You said perhaps about 5 or so agreements have been signed. So therefore, from this one that just concluded, what difference will it make in resolving the conflict between the two tribes?
I feel there are several attempts for making sure that the Misseriya and the Dinka Ngok live peacefully, but all those attempts are undermined by political elites that are either based in Khartoum or Juba. That's one thing I like to make it very clear. If I can start first with the question of a strong language. You know, when I saw the document, when I read the document only came out with about 5 points that have come out very clear. And the 5 points, the language used is really a soft language, a language where the leaders of both communities have agreed to advocate for intercommunal dialogues, and that those dialogues would focus on protection of women, children, properties, and livestock. That's one of the points that came out. The second point is that both communities have agreed that their leaders should be tools for fostering peace, which is actually really a vague language. What do you mean by leaders being tools for fostering peace, peaceful coexistence. And the other one is that they also feel that this initiative that they have need to be supported by the leadership in Juba and Khartoum. And specifically, they see this as the best way of mitigating Abyei political issues, and where they will reach out to Abyei Oversight Committee or Abyei Political Joint Mechanism, and they call for the release of the report around the 2013 crisis that happened in Abyei. There's an investigation that went on there. But one thing that really shocked me is that if you look at the language in UNISFA website on their tweet account, that account that they've been tweeting about the meeting in Kampala, and if you look at a document, there's a bit of missing of language. I look at a tweet at a UNISFA tweet account handler, tweeted by the head of the command, General Benjamin. He tweeted, and in his tweet, he added a language, which was a very good language I wish to see in the document. But that language, when I come to the original document, I can't find the language in any of the clauses. He first say the two community leaders have breakthrough a deal, they have reached a peace deal. And he mentioned the outcome of the deal is that they have agreed that they will continue dialogue, and the dialogue should focus on protection of civilians, livestock, and also they have agreed to cease attacks. The language of to cease attacks, that's the language used by the head of the military for UNISFA, who is General Benjamin. But when I look at the agreement, that particular phrase of to cease attacks is missing. And that could have been the first language I wish to see in the agreement, because we need to find a way of controlling attacks, whether from Misseriya against Ngok Dinka or triggers from Ngok Dinka against Misseriya. Second, I wish that the language would have embraced a track 2, because we have tried track 1. Track 1 is where is a formal negotiation or mediation between Juba and Khartoum. That didn't work. So you could have, I wish that UNISFA could have worked around the language where it empowered the two communities, the Misseriya and the Dinka, to agree on a framework of peaceful coexistence, and where the framework can sanction Juba, can sanction Khartoum to interfere with what they have agreed upon. There's no really proper language on that. And clearly you can see that they have not discussed hardcore issues. What I mean by hardcore issues, eligibility of the voter during the referendum of Abyei, or how to go about the referendum of Abyei. That's a hardcore issue that they push it to be a responsibility of Juba and Khartoum. Of course, yes, as a follow-up of CPA Chapter 4 protocol, it's a prerogative of the political leadership in Juba and Khartoum to agree on that. But they could have really do a lobby language and advocacy language in Juba and Khartoum to change attitudes, to allow a compromise approach in order to reach a solution towards the status of Abyei. So the element of this particular conference in Kampala being a track 2 or a second track diplomacy have really missed its aim, but wish that at least they have reached a consensus that on these 5 particular bullet points that they're going to promote peace, and in promoting the peace, they want to see protection of civilians, and they want to see that their livestock are protected, their women and children and properties are protected. And of course, this comes back also to the new mandate of UNISFA, the leadership of UNISFA. How will they play a big role in translating this particular 4 bullet points or 5 bullet points agreement into reality? Because one of the biggest things that is challenging UNISFA is that UNISFA, it is a complete military-oriented peacekeeping mission. And one thing that I'd like to share with you, and this is becoming my fear, is that the more you have the more you have this series of community dialogues among the communities, you're actually changing the pattern of aggression, and they're becoming more aggressive to each other, and they start losing trust and confidence. And this specifically part of the mistakes of where if we have a peacekeeping mission, which is heavily military oriented with less political orientation or less political representation or less political role to play, it's always a problem. And this is a case study in Darfur with the AMISOM. You know, the way how AMISOM managed Darfur have created a level of hatred among the community of Darfur, which is heavily because they have series of similar peace talks that never been honored. So already start building a mindset. People believe that we will be facilitated to talk about, we don't expect this agreement to be respected. And that radicalized the mindset of the political elites. And specifically, if you have a generation growing around this particular tendency of where agreements are reached and they're dishonored immediately. And that's the fear I have around the attempts of UNISFA. My recommendation is that now UNISFA needs to change their approach. They need to play a big political role, a civilian political role, in ensuring they disseminate this agreement, in ensuring the call of continuous dialogue continue, and those dialogues hold water, not dialogues to be violated.
Mhm. What about the issue of the leadership in terms of the political elites within the Ngok Dinka and Misseriya? Since some of the leaders have diverging views about the intervention established in Uganda to resolve the crisis, I mean, what do you think will happen with that?
Obviously, we're going to have different interpretation. I don't use the word misinterpretation. I like to withdraw that word misinterpretation, but we're going to have a conflicting interpretation of the Kampala outcome or the Kampala agreement that was reached between the Misseriya and the Ngok Dinka leaders. There will be chances of misinterpretation. And specifically, my worry is that misinterpretation from the Misseriya leaders who are political and military influential and owners of cattle herders that like to migrate from Western Kordofan to Darfur, to Abyei, sorry, not Darfur, let me also correct that. I intend to say to Abyei, because every 6 months of the year, there's a migration of cattle from Kordofan side to Abyei. And the owners of those cattle, most of them are political elites and military elites within the leadership of Sudan, within the Misseriya. So they may have a different view on this because the language you have in this particular agreement, which I have not spoken very clear about migration rights, because migration rights have to be reached between Juba and Khartoum on how really Misseriya to migration rights. So the language say only protection of property, and within the properties is the livestock. But now the question around how is the livestock of Misseriya having a migration to Abyei? Because as I said, annually they migrate to Abyei, and in their migration, if they're coming, some of them are committing atrocities. If they're going, some of them are committing atrocities. How do you handle that? It could have been one of the outcomes of the Kampala or the, what do you call the Entebbe or the Uganda peace agreement between the Misseriya and the Ngok. So now we're going to have a new interpretation into this. And specifically, my main fear is interpretation from the political elites of the Misseriya, who might have been also militarily powerful. And you have seen prior these particular peace talks, before there were crises which happened, you might have seen some videos where some of their Misseriya leaders are making an oath that they will never ever compromise there, whatever the situation is. They'll never give in having their rights of migration for grazing in Abyei. So those particular individuals who are politically influential, financial and militarily, they may have a different interpretation of this agreement. And that's why for me, the only way to sanction them is for UNISFA to work together with the AU, to work together with the UN Security Council, to call for a meeting of Juba and Khartoum to agree and to see a way how can they support the implementation of the outcome of the recent Misseriya and Dinka Ngok Kampala agreement.
Who are the actors you believe should be involved in the implementation of solutions brought forth during the Abyei peace talks held in Uganda so that no other impediments are experienced?
I think tripartite approach is required at the level of global, regional, and at least around national. I will wish that there should be a coordinated effort of AU, IGAD, and UN over this issue of Abyei. So around Hanna Tetteh, who is the UN Secretary-General Special Representative to AU, I wish her to organize a coordinated mechanism where she take the lead on behalf of the UN, on behalf of the UN Security Council, on behalf of the Secretary-General, and she draw closer to her the executive secretary of IGAD or the chair of IGAD, which is Sudan at the same time, but also she draw closer to her AU because AU have a role on Abyei. Remember, previously AU have a mechanism, what we call AU high-level panel headed by the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. And I think there's a need for Hanna to draw that particular mechanism where at least tripartite approach is pulled into that. But this means also once he is pushing to make sure that AU, IGAD, and UN coordinate the solution finding for the situation in Abyei, they need to make sure that also in Juba and Khartoum, everybody is engaged at the level of the government to make sure that at least the officials who are in Juba and in Khartoum are adhering to a position taken up by the tripartite approach where you have UN, AU, and IGAD. For me, that's really very important. If you don't involve that, it's going to be problematic. But also this means the military, both the military in South Sudan and the military in Sudan need to be held accountable, because if they're not held accountable, they're the one fueling the crisis. Politically, even if Misseriya and Dinka Ngok disagree, once as long as they don't have access to ammunition and bullets, and they're not facilitated by the military of both capital, Juba and Khartoum, still Abyei will remain peaceful and people can argue. But the chances that the military are compromising in supplying ammunition or allowing communities to access ammunition and rifle from both sides, peace and stability in Abyei is going to be problematic. So my appeal goes still back to the office of the UN Special Representative, UN Secretary-General Special Representative to AU, Hanna Tetteh, to really design a mechanism of tripartite approach where she can bring in AU, IGAD, and UN to sit together and to hold Juba and Khartoum accountable.
What has the leadership in Juba and Khartoum stated thus far about the positive developments that has come out of the dialogue between the Ngok Dinka and the Misseriya that was held in Uganda?
I've not yet seen any official statement, neither from Juba or Khartoum, supporting this process. But what I've seen is that it is in UNISFA website that they say both capitals have supported this particular process because they have delegates that have attended. But I think they are delegates of low political ranking or low political positions. I wish to see an official acknowledgement of this particular development positive results from Juba in terms of the official spokesperson, the government, who's the Minister of Information, similarly from Sudan. So we have not yet seen any official statement acknowledging the outcome of Kampala from both Juba and Khartoum. And that tells you maybe there's a chances that the leaderships in Juba and Khartoum may have reservation on certain provisions of the agreement, but they wish to see them acknowledging and appreciating and congratulating the two committees for taking an option of like peace is the best way they want to live together. So for me, that requires Juba and Khartoum to look into. But also remember, you have such process both in Juba and Khartoum. That those who say forget about Abyei, some of them are based in Juba and some of them are based in Khartoum. If they take a lion's share of shaping the opinion of the leadership in Juba and Khartoum, they may undermine this agreement, and this agreement may not be official acknowledged, because those who believe that Abyei is a headache, let's leave them aside, might have taken a lead in silencing the capitals, both Juba and Khartoum, not to acknowledge this. And I know some of them are close to the leadership of both Juba and Khartoum, those who believe you leave Abyei is a headache.
Yeah. You know, Abyei should not be considered a headache. You know, those are part of our South Sudanese citizens, and we need to acknowledge and support them in this struggle for territorial gain.
Yes, exactly. Because the question comes is that the debate around Abyei, some few indicate so negative. It's looked at so negative, and they see it as it is a question of Misseriya and Ngok Dinka. No, Abyei issue is a national issue. It's not an issue of Misseriya and Dinka. Actually, it will be a mistake of South Sudanese leaders to see Abyei as an issue of Ngok Dinka rather than really an issue of a South Sudan. It's a typical territorial issue of South Sudan in terms of its borders. And remember, as you say, it's a wealthy area. That's one thing I'd like to bring forward. But the other thing is also it comes to the level of what level is the leadership in Juba giving a space for an attention for Abyei issue. We shouldn't allow Abyei to end up as a Kashmir between Pakistan and India. The chances that we have is very high if we can commit our leadership to see Abyei issue sorted out once and for all.
What is the role of SEPO in helping Abyei civil society to influence the implementation of the outcome of the peace talks?
Yeah, so as a civil society organization from South Sudan, as a SEPO, we will make sure that we add our voice to our colleagues in Abyei, and also we make sure that we will speak towards the idea of funding the civil society in Abyei to make sure they have resources to disseminate this agreement, to reach out to the communities, and also to document any violation of this agreement, because one of the things that I know it has not been effectively been supported, that the civil society who are based in Abyei, they're not supported to play their civic role in sensitizing the community, in educating the community, being it Ngok Dinka or being the Misseriya, or even what is called prior migration dialogues can be facilitated the Misseriya and the Ngok Dinka together, since they have already agreed that they want to continue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edmund Yakani, the Executive Director of SEPO, for updating us on the conclusion of the peace talks that was held between the Ngok Dinka and Misseriya in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you too. Likewise.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page at Sunrise Media.